How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I've not just got one, I've got two very special guests for you. Two powerlifting coaches, a massive amount of respect for. I learned a lot from these guys after just completing the Strength Guys internship. They've got multiple world and national titles to the name. Simply put, these guys know what they're talking about when it comes to powerlifting coaching. Today, I am joined by Jason Tremblay and Arian Khamesi. How are you both doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us and making us sound special.
That's it. I'm trying to branch out into. I'm going to be like one of them ring announcers. That's going to be bring that in. No, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. What's been happening in your world since obviously recently the internship has finished, but then obviously Worlds coming up as well, and other things happening in the powerlifting world. What's been happening with you two?
I think the biggest project that we've had on the go at TSG, aside from our ongoing coaching duties, has been the launch of Positions of Power, which is our partnership with the King of the Lifts podcast. Through them, we've been distributing our Shifting the Curve program series that we originally released on my strength book back in 2017 or 2018. We've had hundreds of lifters do that program, experience success on it, and we're excited to bring it back under a new name, a new brand, with some tweaks and revitalizations and modifications. And, probably none bigger than the Atwood series. So we used to have a 4X frequency model, meaning you train the main lifts 4 times per week as the most advanced program in that series. And we've replaced that frequency model of training with a glimpse into how Taylor Atwood trained to achieve his 812 and 838.5 kilo total performances. So I think we have some people who are going through the meat grinder on that program. And it's kind of like that scene from Conan the Barbarian, where when he was a young boy, he started pushing the wheel of pain. Everyone fell off and died. And by the end, there was only Arnold, a fully grown Arnold, still standing and pushing it. And I think the program is kind of like that. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes from. Aside from that, I've been working on designing the athlete management system for my strength book with Mike McDonald. So that's been a really fun and invigorating, and I've learned a lot from this project already in app design. It's both web app and mobile app. But yeah, I'm really excited to gain access to the power of an actual app instead of spreadsheets, because what an app can do from a user experience and also from a querying of data experience, just so much better than what spreadsheets can do. So yeah, it's going to be pretty sick as the months roll on here. It already is, but I'm excited to see it with some of the ideas that I have for the company as well. So that's what's new on my end.
I'm glad I recorded. It was actually on TV the other night, Conan the Barbarian. So I'm glad I recorded that now. And having been lucky enough to speak with Mike McDonald, the plans that he's got for my strength book sounds awesome. As a tool. Arian, what's been happening in your world?
In some ways it's been like another down year for me. In other ways it's been a little bit hectic due to some situations going on. But for example, on my personal coaching side, I came on with the Strength Guys in February. So early on in the year I made the transition over, making the announcement and getting all the clients that I currently have informed of what was going on, and then getting on the new system as far as the the training file, the AMS that we have, and then getting new clients from the Strength Guys, getting on the coaches meetings, the internship meetings, the position of power meetings, stuff like that. So a lot of stuff going on there. But as far as the USAPL national team side, last year we had everything canceled. This year we had our nationals, but it was still like a down year for me as far as my athletes, because some people just didn't want to travel. Some people weren't qualified. And so, less lifters than usual. And then, of course, with the arguments back and forth, the USAPL and the IPF on drug testing, the IPF eventually suspended USAPL. So right now I would have been in Sweden at the World Championships, but because USAPL can't send any team, then I can't go as a coach either. So missing out on another year of Worlds for me, for a couple of my lifters that would have made it, plus, the national team stuff, being able to coach all the athletes. But, just spending more time these days now on the personal coaching stuff, some of the local competitions that we're doing. I've made it past 6 months with Jason, with the strength guy, so I guess I'm doing a good enough job there, and they're keeping me around and stuff like that. So it's fun being more part of a team when it comes to a online coaching focus, and bouncing off ideas and everything like that of ways that we can improve going forward with the Position of Power, with the My Strength book, getting on an app rather than doing the Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. So it'll be interesting what we can do going forward.
Oh, cool. A lot of things to keep you both busy, then keep you both out of trouble. Obviously, being lucky enough to have Jason on a couple of times now on Strength Chat. First appearance, your debut on the podcast, Arian. Just want to give a little bit of a background about how both of you guys ended up working together and sort of built up that relationships. Then obviously, be working together with the strength guys, for people listening who might not know, your backgrounds or how you two got to working together.
Yeah, I've known Arian for a long time, probably in the early stages of him knowing about me. He thought I was an utter idiot, but luckily as time has gone on, I've started getting some better results from my clientele, and I hope people like Arian now respect me a little bit more than when I was bombing it at back-to-back Arnolds with clients. Those weren't my finest moments. I've known Arian in the community for years, and we were looking for a new coach, a mutual friend and another TSG coach, John Downing, just put the feeler out to Arian, and turned out that he was interested, and so we talked and agreed to start working together. And it's been awesome having him on the team so far. So don't let that get to your head, Arian. But
you're looking forward to this next part of the story now.
No, I was gonna mention, for all the coaches out there listening, Jason talks about his mistakes. I mean, we were all idiots at the beginning. I've made plenty of mistakes before as a lifter and a coach. I mean, I tell people about my first meets that I did. I started in USAPL in 2011. The first 2 meets, I didn't have the right underwear. And so, Wayne's are telling me, oh, you can't wear that underwear on the platform. So I just went commando and no one even noticed. So, I was breaking rules at my first meet. I made mistakes in North American championships and world championships early on. So I first got on the international scene around 2014, was Classic Worlds in South Africa. And then, maybe heard about the strength guys and Jason maybe 2016, 2017. That's kind of when the Classic Worlds started picking up with more athletes going, and it kind of being a bigger and bigger event. So that's kind of when I started seeing them at, Worlds, and then obviously at the Arnold Schwarzenegger Festival. And, initially I kind of just started coaching on my own. That's my own little, business name. And I joined up with a couple of my buddies who had gyms down here in Florida and up in New York. And so I was doing the online coaching for them. And then kind of after 5 years with that, I was like, okay, what other opportunities out there to expand further? Because I felt like, I wasn't getting the same amount of clients that I can see other coaches out there getting, that I felt like I was on a similar level of. So, okay, how can I improve and reach more people, not only in the US, but, outside throughout the whole world. So I was talking to different people, talking to John Downing. He said, the strength guys are looking to add on new coaches, and having a meeting with Jason and everything like that. And, it was a good fit as far as we already knew each other a little bit back before, and we knew each other's coaching style and meet handling, everything like that. We kind of had the same idea. So then I was making sure the personality fit and coming on board. And then so far it's been a good fit.
Oh, cool. It's sorry, Jason, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's interesting, especially being lucky enough to do the internship and see how you both mentioned there about mistakes that you've made in the past, whereas actually, beyond that, from an outsider looking in, if you like, and for someone who follows everything that you put out there and the progression that you've seen, you've definitely learned from those mistakes for the success that you've had. And seeing the one thing that I'll probably keep mentioning throughout this chat is the level of professionalism, compared to how you would look at maybe some regional coaches who are handling, compared to, you see the amount of time and effort and data and information that you use to get your athletes to where they need to be, obviously culminating with Worlds on at the minute. So that kind of goes sort of into my first question, is when you're working with the athletes and when they've qualified for nationals or Worlds or whatever competition it is, where do kind of your thoughts go from a coach's point of view, or are your thoughts already planning out, the next competitions or the period of time that they're going to be with you from that very first maybe initial consultation with the athlete?
Yeah, for me, when an athlete qualifies for Worlds, it's a fine line to walk, because you don't want to let what other competitors are doing influence your process until it's like final deadlift time, roughly speaking, right? Like maybe you have a really good squatter and you got to push squat a little bit farther or whatever, but in general, the competition does not matter until it matters on game day. But my first step is to look at who the competition is, and to kind of get a lay of the land of where my competitor is relative to them at the point in time that we're starting prep. And that could be, that's an insightful exercise for like what you may have to, the range that you may have to total within, right? Which is insightful for how aggressive the prep, the peak may have to be for the lifter. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is get down to business with the training. I like to have at minimum 12 weeks to prepare someone for Worlds, but like ideally, I thought before the whole USAPL and IPF argument, I thought the timing of USAPL nationals relative to Worlds was perfect, because you had like almost 40 weeks until World Championships. It felt like something around that time range. So you really have a lot of time after qualifying for Worlds to like just train, get better. And then you could actually like show your best package at Worlds. It was a little bit of a rough turnaround from Worlds to nationals, because you'd only have 12 weeks, but it was still, I liked having more time to get ready for Worlds, because that's the big one in my opinion. And nationals is insanely competitive, hard to win. But for me, competing towards a world championship is where it's at. So, I mean, nationals is really cool. It's special, but it's still qualifying to get to the big stage, right? And kind of how I look at it. So, yeah, just get the competitor ready, keep them focused on their own training, uphold the standards of the rule book in training, meaning that, all squats are to depth, all deadlifts are locked out, all benches are paused. Do that to the best of your abilities. When it comes time for the championship, there's a lot of other things that you have to coordinate with national team coaches, which Arian can speak to, being on that side as the USA Open national team coach. But I also like to do, in addition to my competitors meet strategy, which I do before the scouting. Here's what we're going to do independent of what everyone else is going to do. And then I'll go through and I'll scout their competition, print out scouting reports or send them to the national team coach. Just make sure that we're organized and ready to rock. If it's like a first time competitor traveling a long way, or a crazy year like COVID, There's also it's kind of like a road game in professional sports, right? Like you've really got to be on the ball with your traveling, and having food, transportation, water, shelter, like all these basic human needs, but you can't just wing it with traveling. And I've had the good fortune of traveling with professional sports team Calgary Flames, and certainly like when you're on the road, man, it's comfortable. Like when you're gonna get your next meal, when your transportation is, where you're staying. You don't have to do anything but focus on the game. And I think treating IPF Worlds like that is a really good idea too. Because if you're organized ahead of time, it's just less stress on top of already a really stressful experience, right? Like right now, the competitors are in Sweden, may not have ever been to this country before, not there in the normal time of day that they lift. All the foods are labeled differently. They're labeled in Swedish, not in English or French or Italian or whatever you're used to. It's just a different world. So minimize distracting variables and show up ready. And I think on competition day, the best way to compete is to make lifts and just let the game day coach do what the game day coach does. I think everyone tries to bring some extra heat to the world championship, and usually that's a failure. So just showing up and making lifts, you can beat people that you may never have thought possible. So those are kind of like a random like compilation of my thoughts leading up to a world championship.
I agree with Jason's random thoughts. I mean, starting from the beginning, I've always been like the type that wants to like look into the data and analyze. Okay, even going to the first Worlds I went to 2014 with a couple of my buddies from my university, is like we're looking up like who are these people, because we had never seen them before. We had never gone to an international meet. Like, let's see what kind of numbers they're hitting, what kind of meets can we find on them, everything like that. So always been trying to research what lifters have done in previous competitions, what they're doing in training, everything like that. But you don't want to get too extreme one way or another, which is kind of what Jason's saying. Is like you don't want to assume that all these people are going to progress, they're going to hit monster totals, like their training is looking so great, and now I need to be super aggressive with my attempts to match them, and it may not work out for any of you, and everyone underperforms. And on the flip side, there's some people that say like the competition doesn't even matter, just go do your own thing. And sometimes that's not true either, because you could have maybe won more easily, or maybe if you had gone a little bit more on like a squat or bench press, it would have prepared you better for when it comes to deadlift, depending on especially which lift is your best lift. So I kind of like Jason's approach as well. Like, first build a game plan on just you in a vacuum. What are you capable of, including all those factors of traveling, weight cut, all that kind of stuff. And then from there, look at the lifters, look at what they've been hitting in training, what they've hit in competition, how many attempts do they normally make. And maybe from there, you have to say, okay, if these lifters are wrong, we might have to take our top end third attempts. If these lifters typically underperform and miss all their thirds, maybe we can go a little more conservative with our middle or bottom end third attempts, and we can kind of make attempts and cruise to a podium placing or the world title. So I like that approach. And with traveling, yeah, a lot of people don't understand. It's one thing, like, you drive, 1 hour, 30 minutes down the street, go to a competition, or even like training in the gym, and you're on your own time and everything. You have 4, 5, 6 hour day. And then you compare that to the world championships, where some of these lifters are traveling internationally for the first time ever. Some people don't like going on planes. They're scared. You got to deal with, COVID restrictions, getting tested. You go to another country. You don't know what the food's like, what the water's like. I've seen some people go to a European country and they're drinking water with electrolytes in it. They don't even know. Or they're getting something that has salt in it and they don't even know, because it's hard to read the labels and what's going on. Same thing with the water cutting. A lot of times lifters assume they're going to have a bathtub in their hotel room, because maybe in the US and Canada, they always have bathtubs. They go there and it's a standing shower. We had a lifter that tried to clog the standing shower so he can fill it up a little bit with water, and he closed the door and had it on super hot and tried to put another towel underneath the door so now that he can also create his own little steam room, and he flooded the bathroom and everything like that. So all these crazy stories all the time of people thinking they're gonna have access to the same resources in another country that they do in their own country. So lots of factors like that they have to deal with. And then the timing too. If people have been noticing in the past few years, the sessions have been getting shorter and shorter. So, sometimes, like I think the 66 kilos in 2019, when we had Charles Agapoko for US competing, that was like 2 hours or 2.5 hours, and they were done. Um, right now, there's some sessions I've seen on the schedule where there may be, 20 to 26 lifters, like in the 83s or in the 93s. And instead of having 26 lifters on one platform, 2 flights, what they did is they split it into 2 platforms and have like, 11 and 14 or like 12 and 12. And so now you're down to 1 flight to try and get those sessions to 3 hours or less. So some things that people aren't prepared for, aren't used to. And obviously the referees, like, in your country, all the referees may take one certain referee course, may have to do a certain number of years to go through certain levels and have a certain culture of how they're taught how to referee. But that's not necessarily true from country to country. When you have 135 countries in the IPF and maybe 30, 40 show up to the World Championship, and you have referees from all these different countries, they may call depth differently. They may sit in the chair differently for different lifts. They may call the press command differently and the bench press. And so some of these lifters are not prepared for that, and assume that they're going to be held to the same standards.
You've mentioned quite a lot of things to be covered there. And other things that, something as traveling, you just think, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to a competition, whereas you've got to take into all these other things which are going to be stresses on there, like you mentioned about hotels. And the first thing that you both mentioned was, right, having a plan of, right, okay, what can we do, and then looking at these other areas. I know at the start, obviously mentioning about, learn from mistakes and progressing through now, but from, the systems and the plans that you both have in place now, which has, ultimately allowed your athletes to have success. What have been your biggest learning curves as coaches, trying to cover all those bases? And kind of, I always like to ask, how have you as coaches, who have been your influences and who have you learned from to think, right, okay, so I'm going to pick a little bit from here, pick a little bit from that, to then develop an all-round system, which is going to be, right, okay, this is what's going to separate us from, other coaches, to then take it to that next level, like I said before, that next level of professionalism?
For me, I think the biggest learning curve was being able to program outside of myself, like to write. The learning experience was to tailor the training that he needed to go from totaling 730 and placing second to Kjell Backlund to totaling 790 and placing first over Kjell, right? Like, that was the learning curve, because if you look at the programs before and after, the one after looks psychotic. But if you work up to that, it's doable, right? It's all about building your work capacity so that you can perform and recover from that training and benefit from it. So it's a systematic approach to training was the biggest learning curve. And for me, Ben Escrow was my main mentor with that systematic approach. Ben Escrow and I coached Taylor together for just under 2 years, I think, before he retired from coaching. And then also Matt Gary has been a big influence for me with the systematic approach to I know Matt's very systematic. I would actually say a very professional approach to coaching. Like Matt also has experience in professional sports. I believe he's an intern with the Washington football team. And in general, I think Matt and I know Arian has it as well, but same passion for doing the best possible work that we can on in powerlifting. Like, we all love the sport, and we want to help elevate it and do our best. And we're all competitive individuals who want to win too, right? So the game day planning, like even the simple thing of having your numbers printed out, like you'd be amazed how many people don't do that, or having the freaking records on your sheet, right? So you know what the record is and when that may matter, knowing when you have a lot disadvantage or advantage or a body weight advantage or disadvantage, like stuff like this. Like some people are out to lunch about it, and whenever I see Matt at a meet, he's always consistent, on the ball, attentive, whether it's day one or day 5, and he's been coaching 12-hour days every day, you know, like he's the same. And I really have a world of respect for that. So yeah, for me, I think it's being systematic and being professional were the things that got me over the hump. Because, you know, when Taylor lost to Kjell in Belarus, I saw like 757.5 as like this unbeatable number. 74, you know, it's holy, never seen that before, you know. And I think you've got to have a system. Like when I was writing his meet strategy with Matt to total like 838, I mean, you're looking at these numbers on paper and you're like, this can't possibly be it, you know, like this is like, nobody has come close to this before, right? Like in terms of like history of the sport, you need a system of objective analysis to overcome those emotional doubts and fears. And yeah, I'm very thankful to Ben and to Matt who've helped me get to that point. And other positive influences: Eric Helms, Mike Zerdos, Greg Knuckles, Eric Trexler from Mass. I read their service multiple times every week, you know, go through old articles or the new editions, just stay up to date on what's happening in the community. My friends at Data Driven Strength are good resources as well. Talk to those guys once a month or twice a month. But I think they're coming out with a lot of good content, and just people who are propelling the sport forward. It's all born out of passion. And I think we all speak that same language and kind of attract one another and grow together. So another person I really respect and have learned a lot from is Mike T. I think Mike, to the explorative side. So coaching is never going to be like a research study, because there's always going to be an element of exploration and finding out what's working with the athlete. And I think Mike T has been very innovative with that, the exploration side of coaching for years. So yeah, that's my spiel on who's helped me and what has helped me.
Oh, cool.
Similar stuff for me. For example, when it comes to temp selection and game day coaching, a lot of my base information came from Matt Gary, because we have a USAPL coaching course, and all 3 levels that I took happened to be when Matt Gary was the teacher. So, you know, I learned all my stuff from him initially. And then oftentimes when I was at the Classic World Championships, he was one of the personal or assistant coaches there. So, you know, learned from him while I was there as well. So a lot of the stuff I learned from him as far as like his more systematic approach to attempts and what kind of jumps to make, everything like that. And then from there, it's like some of additional stuff that I learned from him or other people, like, you know, just knowing how to know the rules, like Jason said, knowing lot number, knowing how to chip records, knowing how, like, you know, if there's a relifter, how to go to the jury and get an attempt overturned, so like that. Like knowing the rule book in and out to use that to your advantage as a coach, rather than, okay, I'm just going to pick attempts based on what my lifter could be potentially their max that day. And then the other things like I've seen Matt and some other coaches do is like just being prepared in the warm-up room, like coming, getting a rack, making sure all your equipment's there. Oftentimes, or pretty much every time at a national world championship, Matt also has the plastic clips there, so you don't always have to use the 2.5 kilo collars in case they disappear, or if it's easier to load without it, like you're prepared with, you know, additional stuff like that, clips. Knowing how to, you know, load kilogram plates. A lot of coaches out there still don't know, and they, you know, misload. I've seen like lifters load up their opener or more in the warm-up room at a local meet because they just thought like, the red 25 kilo plates were 45-pound plates. Just even knowing how to use a rack and how to adjust the uprights and, helping other people with spotting and stuff like that for warm-ups. All those things, as Jason said, like the professionalism, knowing the rules and knowing the base level. And then from there, yeah, learning from other people. What things can I do to improve my style over what I've learned from everyone else? And same thing for going back to attempt selection. I really quickly pulled up some stats that a lifter, I believe from Switzerland, Laura did, taking like 200,000 data points from Open IPF. I'll just go over the third attempts. On squat, 34% of people missed their third. On bench, 53% of people missed their third. And on deadlift, 36% of people missed their third. And I believe some of these percentages I think would be higher in recent times because as the totals are going up, as people are getting more in the sport, as there's more depth, that people are going to be more aggressive in their programming leading into a national world championship, and more aggressive with their attempt selection out there, assuming everyone's going to perform their best. And so they have to keep up with that. So you may see more and more missed attempts. So when it comes to my programming and my attempt selection, I may say, okay, 50% of people are going to miss their bench press. I'll be conservative. I'll make my third. You all can have fun missing your third. And then I'll be in a better position going into deadlift. And so we may see some kind of eventually like, kind of a rebound back where, everyone goes really aggressive on programming. You get a lot of people injured going into world championships, a lot of people underperforming at world championships, and maybe people start pulling back a little bit. So that's what I tend to do sometimes with my programming too. A lot of my base programming I learned from Dr. Michael Zoros because he was getting his PhD at Florida State University when I was getting my bachelor's there. So I learned a lot about from him, got into powerlifting from him. And then from there, learning from other people similar to Jason, like whether it's learning from Mike Teixeira, whether it's learning from Bryce Lewis, or even learning from Jason on our internship calls and everything like that, learning some people's different styles and mentalities and why they're choosing certain things coming into training that I can then implement into my own.
Yeah, I must admit from being on the internship calls, especially, I enjoyed doing the scouting reports, and then especially the stats wise, it is one of those things where once you get into it, I wanted to do it all the time. It was like, all right, so percentage wise, this is what we want to be doing for thirds. And, we've mentioned there about the programming side of things, but that's ultimately the tool that the athlete's going to use, and we can track that, use it, and that's where they get the want to be. But I think we've obviously gravitated towards the coaching side of things behind the scenes. We've got the program that's the tool, but in terms of your job while the athlete's training, we're tracking all those sort of things. What's sort of the job in terms of the scouting, looking at the other competition in terms of, right, okay, so like what you've mentioned about the stats there, 30% of people aren't going to make their third attempts. These are things that you need to work on, being prepared. How much sort of work and time and what's the behind the scenes, if you like, to make sure that, right, okay, this is everything that we need, and you've got all the tools there, so that if plan A isn't working, okay, we need to go to plan B, or we need to adjust it around. Because like what you mentioned there, Arian, of all right, well, I'm gonna get my athlete to do this and this, and yeah, that'll be pretty good. Let's do that on the day, rather than being, right, okay, this is plan A. We've got some options depending on how it goes. This is what the rest of the flight is looking like, and this is how we're going to work from it. What sort of your thoughts and processes behind that?
Yeah, for me, when I write a meet strategy now, I'm very reliant upon whoever the game day coach is to make the right call. So openers is set in stone. Opener is well practiced in training. I have very little doubts about that unless something is egregiously wrong on the day. Second attempt is a range, whether that's a 1 or a 2% range. It depends, but it's a range. And third attempt could be a 3 to 4% range between plan A and plan C. And it's all about, it doesn't matter what you did in training on competition day. It matters how the previous lift went. And to some extent, how the competitive scenarios are unfolding in national and world level meets sometimes, right? So yeah, I think a lot of people shoot themselves in the foot by like testing the 1RM and then working backwards to come up with a meet strategy. Whereas um, I like to set the opener and then work forwards. So we'll practice the opener, determine that, and then practice the second attempt, determine that, and oftentimes don't even practice the third attempt in training. Right? You save that wear and tear on the lifter, and like maybe they've done like 10 to 15 reps combined with their opener and second attempt on each lift by meet day. Like I'll live with that amount of practice. And then like really the only decision you have to make is what can they do without shooting themselves in the foot by missing on their third attempt. And that's my preferred scenario to be in. As far as scouting, I've as a result of all the work I've done in sports science, I've gotten a lot more efficient at building athlete management systems and sports science hubs. And it used to take a long time to look people up because it was all manual. But now, like, I did a scouting report for my client who competed in the 93 juniors and took me 5 minutes, just copy paste, boom, boom, boom. And we have all your data because of Open IPF, which is such an amazing resource in open powerlifting, right? So it used to take a lot of time. Now it's pretty quick. Common trend I've learned from doing these scouting exercises is how much people overperform in training and underperform on meet day. And I think part of that is it's personality based, standards based. It's training off of RPE, especially like that top set model where that's your way of influencing progress is you got to lift more weight next week, even when now there's an intersection between how much weight you're going to attempt to lift and like your squat depth is now like an inch or two higher than it was the previous week, So, and I know you guys saw similar when we were doing the scouting reports, right? Like you see these outlandish numbers, kind of these RPE ratings where you watch the video and they'll be like, that was an RPE 8. But in reality, it was probably like an RPE 9.5. Like maybe you could have done like 5 kilos more, but you definitely didn't have 2 more reps in you, and then you just see all of these crazy expectations, these outlandish training numbers. You just see it on competition day. People show up and start missing lifts and, didn't really factor in the amount of weight they cut, being in a foreign country, all these different variables. And so for me, it's very focused on our process, and the scouting is just good to have, right? Like if you're in a battle for a record, or maybe you're in a close battle for the win later on in the meet, you can run some math ahead of time to try to forecast what your competitor may be trying to do, where they may be trying to go, and you can let that somewhat influence your attempt selections if it's there. Otherwise, don't bother, just take what you can take.
Yeah, I mean, again, agree with a lot of stuff Jason says. As far as building out a game plan, some things I'll add on is like if it's a local level meet and I'm not going to be there for them and they kind of have to pick based on my plan on their own, oftentimes I'll be more conservative. So a lot of my athletes complain like, oh, why you give me such low numbers? I can do more and more. I'm like, well, I'm not there in the moment to see how things are going to adjust accordingly up or down. Like Jason says, at that point, when you hit your opener, doesn't really matter what you did your last meet or what you did in training. It's what's the speed of that opener and where do you want to go from there. So oftentimes I'll be more conservative, but I'll tell my athletes, you're an adult. You paid money to enter this meet. You did all the training. Like whether you're happy or disappointed from this competition is based on what your goals are in mind. So if you want to adjust the plan, you can go ahead and adjust the plan. But this is what I recommend based on your previous meets, your past training, and me not being there. And then they can do whatever they want with that. And when it gets to higher level meets like nationals, Arnold, Worlds, especially if I'm going to be there, well, if you want me to be there to handle you and I'm not even charging you for my time in that session, because oftentimes, like, if I'm going to be at nationals, I'll just handle my lifters. They just pay for the coach's fee for me to be in the back room. Well, then you need to put some trust into me to adjust things up or down, again, based on how the opener is going, based on, how the judges are calling things, how long the pauses are for bench press, what are your competitors doing, everything like that. And, I don't fault the lifters as much for like thinking like, they're going to put up some big numbers. Like, they got to have confidence in themselves. They have to believe in themselves that they're capable of big numbers. It's on the coach to then make the right call, whether it's in training. Like, I tell the lifter, like, hey, you thought the RP was this, this, and this for this week, but I thought the RP from the outside looking in was this, this, and this for each of the singles or back off sets or whatever we're doing. And same thing in a meet. They might think like, oh, I got, 300 kilos in me. And I'm like, well, based on how I thought the 285 looked, we should go at 290 or 292 or something like that. And so it's on the coach to, be the unbiased person and, make the right call, or like tell the lifter what they need to hear. Whereas the lifter can be unbiased and, have confidence in themselves. So that's what I try and do at the higher level meets. As far as a national team coach for Worlds as well, I like to, in the last 4 to 6 weeks before Worlds, each week send out a form to all the lifters on the team and say, fill out the form with like, what your body weight was, what your heaviest training was for the week, put a video in, or RPE, a percentage, whatever like that. And so I can keep track of all the lifters' heavy training going into Worlds and their body weight. And if they put the videos, I can look and see, was it to depth, was it pause, that kind of stuff. And then when they send me their game plan, I can then go look at their game plan, go look at the recent training and their meet results and see whether it falls in line. Or if I need to go and tell them, hey, based on your previous meet results and your training, I think you're being too aggressive. We need to make these adjustments. And it helps, again, with Open IPF and just our USAPL database to also be able to go and say, hey, listen, you missed 67% of your bench presses. I think you're being too aggressive with your bench press. Clearly, your previous strategy isn't working. We need to adjust down. Like, I had a lifter that's going to be starting with me soon, and every single meet he's done, he's missed a third attempt bench. He's never hit a third attempt bench in a meet. And the good thing is he acknowledges that. So on the call, we discussed that and said, like, whatever you're doing is clearly not working, whether it's the programming or improper attempts, thinking you have more than you, but we need to make that adjustment. So oftentimes with the national team, where I'm not personally coaching that lifter, it's collecting all the information and using the data and the statistics on them and their competitors to say, hey, look, from the outside looking in, this is what I think is happening. This is what I think you're doing right. This is what I think you're doing wrong. And these are adjustments we need to make.
Yeah, kind of two things as you were both speaking there. One might be a massive tangent that we might go on, but it just came to my mind when you were both speaking. And then the second one, I'll say the first one that came to mind. Obviously, when you were speaking there about scouting and seeing people that sometimes people overachieve in training and underperform in on competition, do you think, and when you were speaking about personalities, do you think that's sometimes down to the lifter, or do you think sometimes that's down to the coaches in terms of the standards that they set in terms of, look, no, this is the standard that we need to hit. We're getting close to the competition. We can't be having openers high or no pauses or anything like that. So that's the tangent. The second one was in terms of, if your distance, like athletes being over in Sweden for Worlds this year, working with national coaches, working with other people that are going to be handling them on the day, and how sort of your approach is in terms of communicating with them and, making sure that like I say, all those bases are covered, but you're still there as the coach of, no, this is what we've been working on. This is what I need to be implementing. So there's kind of the two questions that came out after that. Tackle whichever one you want first.
Yeah, I think when it comes to collaborating with another coach who's handling your client, it helps to have handled a client who is not yours in the past, because there's a lot of questions that I remember having about that person that I wasn't able to answer because, I wasn't involved in the training leading into this competition. And so I use those questions as my guide for what information to provide to the coach. So like for the French team coach, I sent her an information sheet with the scouting report for his class. And I said, here are all the things that, here's how training went, like kind of a written summary of the prep, not a life story, like just try to keep it to like the important events and generally like the trend of each lift. And here's what you need to watch out for. And then if you have any questions, I'm available to discuss. And that's what I try to do. I've never worked with a federation where the national team coach wasn't collaborative. So I've been very lucky in that regard. So yeah, and what was your first question again? I'll get to that also.
The first question was when we were talking about the standards of lifting and scouting and people overperforming in training, underperforming on competition. Is that down to the lifters' personality, or is that down to the coaches not setting the standards and potentially not having, not dialing that in a little bit more with their coaching?
I think it's a pretty individual scenario, but I would say it's the process as a whole, right? Like, I think an experienced coach can watch a lift, and given that lift is like at body weight and on or near body weight and on competition equipment, an experienced coach, even as an outsider, could determine relatively, if that looked like an appropriate opener or second attempt, or if that looked like more like a third attempt. And so I think when you're scouting people, you can just try to like tune in to these people they're lifting, because everyone posts everything on Instagram now, right? So like you got like the whole life story on there, and just go through it and like put the pieces of the puzzle together about how that lifter is doing, and are they a chronic underperformer, or do they usually perform better in meets than they do in training, which is obviously a best case scenario, or is what they do in training what they do on the platform. And it helps to look through open IPF or open powerlifting and kind of see those trends, as Arian mentioned, and then just watch their lifting and get an idea of where they're at. But yeah, I think it's a pretty individual thing.
As far as the first topic, yeah, I kind of agree with Jason that it could be individual from lifter to lifter. Like some people will hold themselves to the standard. Some people will, cut their depth or, jump their press command a little bit as things get heavier. Some people will be more on top of their nutrition, where some people may not. At that point, though, I guess it depends on the coach and how confident they feel in themselves that they need to then, go and adjust based on the individual lifter underneath them. If someone's on top of things, then, they don't have to put as much time and effort into, making sure they're on top of things. But for a lifter that, is cutting their depth so they can do more and more, or like, is staying higher in their body weight as it's getting closer and closer to competition, then you need to have that conversation. Say, hey, listen, you need to, make your lifts to standards, or else it's not going to transfer well to the competition. Or you need to say, you need to be at this body weight at this time, and in order for us to do an effective water cut. If you come in too heavy, then it's going to be too hard of a cut, and you're going to, be depleted or maybe even miss weight, those kind of things. So it comes to the coach of like, being aware of what's going on and then coming in and make an intervention when it is appropriate. The other thing I was going to mention too, that for some lifters, I mean, there are plenty of lifters that will overperform in training and then underperform in the competition. But for some of them, I want to mention that it is intentional. Part of the reason of walking around above your weight class is obviously to have more muscle mass and try and move more weight. And then you cut weight and you may lose some. Let's say, you do 100 kilos in training and then you hit 97.5 in competition when you cut down to your weight class. But if you're walking around at weight inside your weight class, you may only do 95. So it's still beneficial for you to walk around heavy, do that cut, lose a little bit, but you're still above if you're walking around at weight. So for some people, that little bit of drop is intentional and beneficial compared to just walking around at weight. But yeah, there are some people that expect that they're gonna hit more than the weight they hit in training when they have all the time in training and they have like maybe pound plates and they're 3 to 5% overweight, and then they don't realize that when it comes to competition things change. And as far as the second topic, yeah, I haven't had too many or really no issues collaborating with other countries. I haven't had too many lifters in other countries. Canada, obviously, I've had a few lifters, and they've been pretty welcoming, especially like 2019 Bench Worlds. They nominated me as a coach on their team, so I was able to go and coach my athlete for Team Canada. And, they trusted me. Maybe if it was like what's
You're
that?
you're on the good team finally, Arian.
Yeah. I got my badge. I can put it on and switch over to Team Canada permanently. But, maybe it's because they trusted me. Maybe if it was like, a first time personal coach, they may be a little bit more weary. Like, hey, what's your game plan? Like, hey, do you know you have to wear the appropriate clothing? Like, hey, you can't just go run off to a jury unless you communicate with us first. Whereas me, like, I've been a national team coach and I'm an international referee. So, okay, Arian knows what he's doing. Because sometimes for us, as far as the US coaches, like I first did 3 years with the sub juniors and juniors before I moved to the open. And sometimes with those sub junior and juniors, those are the biggest problems because it's like younger lifters who think like, they're the best. They think like, they're going to progress a bunch and, they're going to win easily. You have people that haven't been around that long. It could be their first time traveling internationally, the first time going to world championship. And sometimes they're coached by their parents, and like parents in any sport, like, think their child is the best ever. Like, they're the next Michael Jordan or whatever like that. So sometimes they're very biased and think like whatever weight you put on the bar for their kid's going to get. And it's like, nah, like, based on the time we saw, that's not going to happen. Or they're not close to like, getting on the podium. We just want to like, make attempts and have them have a successful meet and, be happy to be there and make lifts and stuff like that. So sometimes the more headbutting is with the sub juniors and juniors. But when you get to, open and then masters, they tend to be a little bit more conservative and more agreeable, whether it is the lifter but also dealing with the coaches. They're more understandable. Okay, the lifter knows what they're doing. It's not their first time there, and if it's a coach like me who's been there before and knows what they're doing, it's not an issue. For some countries, I guess some coaches would have to watch out for is they may have specific rules or strategies based on their federation and how they pick attempts. For example, for some of them, they may get funding based on team points or medals. And in a world championship, you don't only get a medal for the total, you get medals for each individual lift. So you can get like, last place in the squat, last place in the bench press, and get like, a bronze medal on the deadlift and get last place overall. But that bronze medal on the deadlift, they can take back to their country, and maybe the lifter or the federation is going to get funding based on that. So sometimes there are some countries that will go more conservative to like guarantee a deadlift medal and place lower in the total. So in that case, as a coach, you may have to understand that, and you may have to make the adjustment and say like, hey, you're not going to be able to go with the attempt that you want and place as high as you want for your individual lifter because they're focused on the entire team aspect and their federation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That I suppose as well when we're talking on the world stage that there's going to be other things. It's not just rightly or wrongly, again, that might be another tangent that goes on there, but being dictated by no, this is the plan, this is going to help us get to where we want to be, or help with funding or anything like that. A couple of things that you both mentioned there, and it kind of goes back to the first topic that we were mentioning about from sub juniors to juniors to open, they're learning and having experience and gaining experience as well as they're developing through their powerlifting, journey, if you like. And if, they're going in and it's their first worlds and they're saying, yeah, we're going to hit this. Whereas someone who's a little bit more experienced, like Taylor, for example, who, has been there, how important is that building trust and developing that relationship with the coach? Because I know obviously we'll have, some people might be you might not be there as their coach handling them, but then how does that then impact on for further competitions and further worlds, if that kind of makes sense, if you kind of know what I'm saying?
Well, I certainly, I wish more of my clients were like Taylor. People like to, in conversation with me, ask how Taylor does things. And I was like, well, there's only one Taylor, best lifter in history. Like I wish I had more of them, but I think it's probably very likely that throughout the remainder of my career, I'll never work with someone more talented than Taylor. He may be generational, like it may be 10, 20, 30 years before we see another. So it's like, it's hard because Taylor and I are like this, right? Like we've known each other since 2014. we've gone through a lot of experiences together. I know his family, he knows my family. I know his wife, like we're more than just like coach and athlete, like we're really good friends, and been through a lot together. So, it's close. And so we're able to have very constructive conversations about his training, that with other clients where it's coach and athlete, you don't have those bonds. It's kind of a different conversation, like Taylor and I will sometimes go at each other too in conversation, but we know it's for the better good. It's for the better outcome. So yeah, I think when communicating with a client before the meet, I like to lay their game plan out to them. This is what I recommend, and a lot of the time I'm not open to feedback on that at all. I'm like, here's the plan. You're gonna do it, because I do think these, people with less experience go out there and miss a bunch of lifts, and you do enough scouting of it, you watch enough powerlifting, coach enough powerlifting. It's a story that's as old as time, right? In powerlifting, people just underperforming, and I think it's pretty clear to me that the way you win powerlifting meets is by making your attempts. And I think sometimes you just have to watch out for the person and just say it. But like a difference is with some clients, with Taylor, for example, like I will listen to them, and say like, hey, like I'll give you the benefit of a doubt if you think I'm off, because the other side of it is that no matter how accomplished a coach is, they can always be wrong, because everyone is human, and I do think you have to listen to people also. So it's a tough balance to toe, but that's some insight into how Taylor and I function, and how I try to function with other clients as well.
Yeah, similar thing, especially on the national team side. Like for the sub juniors and juniors, you may see them again in that age division or in the future once they age up into the next division. So you may have like, some lifters right now, world championships, they missed out on their last year, sub juniors last year. This is their first year as juniors, and they may not be winning. They might be third, fourth, fifth place. But those coaches know they're going to see them possibly for the next 3-4 years. And so it's good to develop that relationship that first time, especially when maybe there's not as much pressure. Like, they know they're not going to podium. They're just going to make their attempts, but you get the relationship. You see what their training is like. You see what their game plan is like. You get to see them in competition. Like, how do they feel? Everything like that. And when you come back the next year, you kind of know them. They know you, and you can have more of a collaborative relationship going forward. And if they end up being like someone who long-term stays in the sport, like someone like Rhea Stin from Canada has gone from sub juniors to juniors to open, that like, whatever coach she works with, they've probably worked with her before. They know her style. They know how many attempts she makes. They know she knows the rules and everything like that. And it's more beneficial going forward. So it's definitely good to build that relationship. And from the personal coaching side, same thing. Some lifters may come and go. They might do like, one competition with you and they disappear. And like, the amount of time you develop with the programming and the game plan or anything like that kind of goes to waste. But some lifters do stay, 3, 4, excuse me, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And so it's good to develop that relationship where you know each other. And if like an athlete has to make an adjustment in the training within a week, sometimes like they can already know, okay, I think Aaron would do this. He'd combine, the squat and deadlift day and the bench day into SPD day because that's what he's done in the past. And then they can let me know. I'm like, okay, that's fine that you had to do that on a condensed week. And so they can, make those adjustments. And then also, talking about training or game planning for big meets, like Jason said, it becomes more of a collaborative relationship. It's not like you telling the athlete, this is what we're going to do. You've never been here before. I have the experience. Like, I know you, versus like, hey, this is what I think. And then the athlete's like, this is what I think. And then like having a discussion saying, okay, how likely do you think it is for, for Taylor Everett, to hit, a 300 kilo squat or like that? Or how likely is it for you to hit a 305 kilo squat, do you think, in your mind? And, go off like maybe more the percentages of what it is to hit each attempt, whether it's the top third attempt, the middle, or the bottom, and what the other competitors are doing, and coming with a plan where, maybe you can give some leeway to the athlete. If it's there that day, you give it to them, especially if they ask for it. So I've had this discussion with some other coaches and on like different podcasts, like, sometimes I'll ask a lifter, like, after the second attempt, they come off like, do you want 100 kilos or 97.5 kilos? And they're like, and they're like waffling back and forth. Okay, 97.5 kilos. But if they come off and I say, hey, you want 197.5? They're like, give me 100. I got it. Like, okay. It was in our estimations, like, the second attempt moved well. They're feeling good. They're feeling confident. They know they're capable of 100. You give them that leeway. Versus if they're unsure, if like they don't even know if they can hit it, then you probably shouldn't give it to them. So there's little things like that you learn. And sometimes on the other side, the athlete gives more to me the longer we go. So I've had some lifters that like they just do their lift and they walk off and they go in the warm room and they sit down. At that point, they're like, Arian knows me. He knows what he's going to put in. Like, I don't have to have a conversation with him unless something's really off. If like they're in pain, like, hey, my back hurts, something like that, they might say it. But if they feel good, they just kind of walk off and let me choose. So sometimes they end up giving you more as the relationship develops more and more, which is kind of what I've done too as an athlete. Like when I've competed, like I did one North American championship where I was like a assistant coach for the team, and then I competed. And so I had one of the other coaches handle me. And I kind of just like, walked off and bench, like whatever you put in is fine. Like, I trust you and stuff like that. So the relationship could be beneficial that way long term.
Yeah, there's sort of, when you were chatting there, it's kind of, we've spoken in the past about beginner, intermediate, and advanced lifters. Obviously, if you're going to compete at Worlds, you're going to be at a certain level. But from as you were both speaking there, it's kind of, there's levels within those World Championships, people who have gone there for the very first time, people who have had a little bit more experience and are wanting to climb up those rankings a little bit. And I don't think it's the end of the world if it's somebody new, maybe somebody who's just come from the juniors and then going into the open. It's kind of, a different ball game. It's kind of a different animal from the juniors being in the open and being like, right, this is the plan, this is how we're going to do it. Whereas for somebody who you've worked with for quite a long time, maybe you've had that experience. Going right back to the very first question that I asked about mistakes, they might not have got the right hotel, they might not have, got the right food and made mistakes from there, who have been around the scene for a little bit longer, and then being able to work from there. So it's not a case of, no, if you're at Worlds, you've got it all together, you know exactly what you're doing, and it's plain sailing, you just go out there and lift. I think from everything that we've spoken about there, there's a lot more to it from the athlete's point of view in terms of planning and making sure that they've got accommodation and all those other things, but also the main bulk of the chat has obviously been the level of professionalism and the amount of work from the coaches end that goes on behind the scenes. So kind of the last question that I like to ask, from everything that we've chatted about there, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom for either athletes looking at coaches who are progressing, and setting the standard, but then also on the flip side of that, from coaches who get into that level of professionalism?
I think for me, you gotta look at their performance as a coach and then decide what they need, like from a physiological standpoint, and you've got to train that. So to train to physiological objectives is really important. I think a lot of people get lost in the noise of just doing top sets all the time because that's what everyone does. But the reason why you would do top sets are to improve neuromuscular efficiency and confidence under load, and you don't need to do that 52 weeks out of the year to do that. Got like 2 weeks before a meet doing 10 to 15 singles for your opener and second attempt on each lift. That'll improve your neuromuscular efficiency just fine too, right? Like there's other things in lifting that could be limiting you, such as your ability to perform and recover from training, which is to speak about work capacity, or maybe you're undersized for your class and you need to increase your cross-sectional area. You need to build muscle. So when you build muscle, you have more contractile proteins pulling in the same direction. There's a hypothesis out there that I agree with. I think it's pretty logical that you have more muscle, you have more of capacity to improve your strength in the future, right? It's not to say that like you should train like a bodybuilder, but probably a bigger competitor with a bigger engine is more likely to outperform a smaller competitor with a smaller engine, right? So I think there's that. I think I've seen this a few times now. They're tricky consultations. Again, no one's perfect. No one wins them all. I've been humbled by that as time goes on, but get these high level competitors who don't have a shred of work capacity, you know, and you get stuck, and it's like, well, now what do? You know, like you've ridden this intensity heavy model of training as far as you can possibly go, and it's not working for you anymore. Oh my God, you know, like what can you do with your training now? Like do even more intensity? Can you handle that? Can you recover from it? Or, you know, do we got to start doing volume? It's like, well, can you handle that? Can you recover from that? And it's kind of like this dead end that I feel like with some of our competitors who we've trained for a long time, we've been able to avoid, because our system is based on systematic progressions over time. And so they kind of build conditioning and tolerance and the ability to perform and benefit from training as time goes on, you know. And so we tend not to hit that dead end of like, wow, you know, I can't progress with my training the way that it was. I got to a high level, but I don't know what to do now. And that's a really tricky point to reach. So I think improving what you need and analyzing performance in terms of like key performance indicators, tying that to physiology is important. Lift to the rule book, listen to your coach. Those are my main ones. I think, not that that's going to change the world or anything. You know, we have so many stubborn people in the world that it doesn't make an ounce of a difference. But I feel like if people listen to those who are experienced, the standard of performance would be a lot better than it is.
Yeah, I guess, you know, Jason covered a lot of the programming aspect. I mean, similar stuff when it comes to the actual game day. Like if you're a coach trying to improve yourself as far as game day coaching, understand it's a little bit different than programming. Some people are good at one and not good at the other. Some people are good at both. And so if you're not good at the game day coaching, it's like, you know, going and learning, whether it's some kind of class you can take, like the USAPL coaching course, the IPF coaching course, or like, you know, communicating with different coaches and learning the attempt selection process and warm-up process and how a competition flows. From there, it's like knowing the rules in and out as far as like, you know, the breaks, whether it's one flight or two flights, knowing the fraction cars, knowing how to change openers, third attempts, lot numbers, body weights, chipping records, all that kind of stuff. And then also as a coach being professional there. So like, you know, working with other coaches and other athletes in the warm-up room, having your lifter prepared, you know, 2 or 3 lifters out ready to go. So when they say bars loaded for your lifter, they're there, or they already have their wrist wraps wrapped, their belt ready to go, everything like that. And, you know, also being dressed appropriately, following the rules, and, you know, whether the calls go your way or not, whether you get a lucky call or unlucky call, like, you know, understanding that, you know, people do make mistakes. Me as a referee has made a mistake. It's okay to, like, you know, be angry or mad about the moment, but also like having some kind of limit. At a certain point, if you do something or say something, it's going to be too much for a professional sport, whether it's NHL or NBA or the IPF, and that the referees or the jury will do something to correct you. And so you don't want to be known as a person, you know, got kicked out of the world championship or suspended because, you know, you're berating the referees or like cursing at them or whatever. So there's some professionalism to that. And
that
same thing
happens every period in an NHL game, Arian.
Maybe NHL's got a little bit more leeway. They put you in the timeout box if you're a bad lifter or a bad athlete. And same thing from the athlete perspective. If you're an athlete and you're trying to get better at meets, then obviously doing more meets, gaining more experience is going to help. And then learning more, whether you're working with a coach or by yourself, like learning to do things to standard, learning the speed of a competition, trying to match that in training. Don't take 20-minute breaks in training, and then you go to a competition, there's a flight of like 7 or 8 lifters, and you're like, holy crap, this is fast. And again, same thing with the referees. A lot of lifters want to yell at the referees, or go get in their face or something like that at like nationals. I guess that happened with one lifter, and it's like you gotta hold yourself to a certain standard and take responsibility for your own actions. If you were doing fast presses in the gym on your bench press, and then you go to a meet and they hold you and they give you a long press command, you can't then get mad at the referees and be like, hey, what the hell are you doing? Why are you giving me this long press commands? It's you that didn't hold yourself to the standard, and then you're expecting to get like the leeway in the competition. So that kind of covers as far as like developing yourself from both sides. And then as a lifter, also picking a coach for like meet day handling. Like maybe your coach can't come. If you're going to pick a specific meet day handler, maybe see if your coach knows someone. If they don't know, then it's on you to like research. Yeah, who have they coached? At what level? Do they often make attempts? Do they often miss attempts? Do they know the rules? Are they going to put effort into researching your competitors and your training beforehand? Or are they just going to show up on the day and be like, okay, what are we doing? There was that, I believe at nationals, like some coaches that maybe weren't there, or maybe something happened and they couldn't be there for a specific session, and maybe their athlete didn't have a game plan because their coach was going to come with it, or maybe they had their attempts but they didn't have their warm-up because their coach like knows their warm-ups in their head. Or sometimes even like they only have their openers, like, yeah, my coach said that based on openers we'll figure out the second and third. And it's like you're trying to help out this lifter, but like you have no idea what they've done in training, what they've done in a previous meet, what their game plan was, because their game plan was just like openers. They have no warm-ups or like that. So if you're going to select a meet day handler, you want to try and look into those things, maybe have a call with the coach and see whether it's a good fit and whether it'd be beneficial to you to use them at a high level competition.
Yeah, you both mentioned it a couple of times there, the standard from a lifter or a coach's point of view. And I know from my point of view, getting an insight into how you guys work, there is that standard to aim towards and set, which for everything that we've covered through there, the amount of detail, the amount of effort, and again, I've used that word quite a lot, professionalism, in terms of how you're coaching, and as well pride in your work in terms of what you do, to be able to, I know we've spoken about world titles, national titles, but even just getting lifters to go 9 for 9 or get a PB or build the total and progress. So yeah, thanks a lot for both of you taking the time to jump on. I feel like, yeah, a lot of times there could be a lot more tangents and other questions I can throw out from there, learning from you both. But for everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've chatted about today, whether they're athletes or coaches, want to have a look at the content that you put out there, or even get involved in some coaching or advice from you guys, where can people find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, you can get in touch with any member of our group by sending a DM to @thestrengthguys or on Instagram, or you can just go to thestrengthguys.com and click the contact us box and write to us. That's easiest. I barely post, so if you want to follow me, it's @JasonTSG. But again, I make posts like less than 4 times per year, so don't have high expectations when you click the follow button.
I post a little bit more than that, but it's definitely been, frequency's been going down as I've been getting more and more clients through TSG, because obviously, the priority is my coaching. And then when I have some free time, okay, let me post something on Instagram. But yeah, the company stuff is the easiest, thestrengthguys.com or the Strength Guys on Instagram. My Instagram is Coach Arian K. I respond to my DMs if you want to message there, ask any questions, or get more information as far as like I have a YouTube channel. If you ask, I'll send you over links to like different videos I have on YouTube if people want help like basic attempt selection or how a competition goes, rules of performance, programming, all that kind of stuff on there. Or if they have any specific questions, let me know.
Awesome. For everyone listening, if you haven't gone back and listen to the episodes, the Strength Guys as a company, I've had numerous episodes with everyone of the team, and they're a company that, yeah, Exactly like what we've said, they set the standard, and the content that they put out there, is only beneficial for powerlifting, whether you're an athlete or a coach. So 100% go check out the stuff that these guys are doing, especially, within the sport of powerlifting. You're going to get some really, really good value from there. So Arian, Jason, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.